those here present and those who are on YouTube to our Montgomery County Housing Opportunities Commission meeting of February the 7th, 2024. I'm Roy Priest, the chair of the commission. I'd like to introduce the other commissioners who are also present. To my immediate left is our vice chair, Fran Kelleher. To her left is Linda Kuhn, commissioner. To my right is Chair Pro Tim Jeffrey Merkowitz, and to his right is Robin Solomon, commissioner. And also on virtual, Commissioner Pamela Berg. I want to welcome you, being all present. So all commissioners are in fact present for this meeting. I also want to take a moment just to acknowledge the presence of our former commissioner, Jackie Simon, who's here with us today. And so, good to see you, Jackie. You just can't stay away. That's so we will. There will be a slight modification to the agenda. The report of the Resident Advisory Board will be done a little later in the agenda because the Vice President of the RAP has asked to come a little late because of a conflict. And so we will receive when they get here, okay? So we will proceed, therefore, and there's no one who has signed up for the community forum. And so we will, in fact, proceed to the next item on the agenda, which is a report of the President, President Chelsea Andrews.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, members of the public, and the HOC team. I'm pleased to share with you an overview of our activities in the month of January 2024. Next slide. Some of the highlights that you will hear about today include spotlighting our Westwood Tower Staff Appreciation Breakfast that took place, our HOC in the news, highlights from our Resident Services Division, our Housing Resources Division, Maintenance Division updates, as well as our mortgage finance highlights and real estate development activities. Next slide. As you can see depicted here, we really paused in the month of January to thank and acknowledge our HOC team and staff that really went above and beyond to support our residents at Westwood Towers. I want to thank the commission and the board for your support, showing your support to our employees, and also again, just echo the same appreciation and sentiments to the staff, some of who were in the room here, some of whom might not have been at this celebration, but should know how much they were appreciated for their volunteerism. I will also share that things are going along in a very positive direction in regards to our Westwood Towers emergency response. The electrical issues have subsided, and we are, although it was not related, in the process of doing the fire panel repair. So that work is underway. Next slide. We also continue to have features in various media outlets. City Biz covered some of our accomplishments without our prompt on January 12th. And we also had our Senior Vice President of Real Estate, Zach Marks, on a podcast. This is not our sentiment, but this is in fact the name of the podcast, but it allowed another opportunity to share insight on our Housing Production Fund. Next slide. And as it pertains to resident services and all of the continuous outreach that we do, you will see that we continue our after school, out of school programs at our cider mill site. We also had tutoring and enrichment for our Stewarttown Homes teens, and our Piano Pals program is very successful and ongoing at Tanglewood Apartments, and is facilitated by the Tay Foundation. And I want to just highlight, this is a wonderful program for our youth, and they continue to really benefit from this. Next slide. We also conducted computer distributions at Magruder's Discovery in Seneca Ridge, and a meet and greet was conducted at Strathmore Court. Next slide. You can see that we continue to engage with our seniors. There was bingo, as well as lively performances that occurred at Forest Oaks and Waverly House. Next slide. We are always looking for ways to help our seniors tap into technology and have the support around that. So you see, in addition to a meet and greet that took place at Forest Oak, there was a Grow with Google informative event that took place at our Arcola Towers. Next slide. And we leverage our partnership with University of Maryland student nurses. They provide health screenings to our residents at Willow Manor, at Fair Hill Farms, and residents on the lane, and those are ongoing programs. Next slide. Our Service and Coordination Division provides support to our residents with relocation and recertification assistance, as well as providing referrals to our rental assistance programs and working in conjunction with services to end and prevent homelessness. That's reflected here. Next slide. And in partnership with a great deal of nonprofits that are spotlighted on this slide, we continue to provide food resources to our residents, and we continue to facilitate a senior nutrition program across our portfolio. Next slide. In regards to HOC Academy, our youth education and enrichment programs are ongoing. The youth enrichment series, yes, after school clubs were hosted, Mad Science, Carpe Diem, cultural arts, life skills, all of those are taking place across our portfolio, along with the middle high school initiative STEAM Forward. Next slide. Adult education and workforce development is also very robust. We have our small business strategy course. We brought together our alumni so that they can continue to feel supported and to help be great stewards for the incoming classes. 13 alumni began the legalization process for their businesses, and 55 customers were referred to the Montgomery College TechMap Foundation's 2-day boot camp. We also sponsored our second cohort of Microsoft 365 training series course, and that began actually this month here in February. Next slide. Our financial literacy course continues to provide resources. Again, these resources are available to individuals who are in our programs as well as individuals on the waiting list. You can obtain information in regards to these resources at www.hocmc.org. There were 21 customers and 7 waiting list customers that took advantage of our one-on-one counseling, and there were 6 financial literacy workshops that took place. Next slide. Our supportive services team provided support for 347 participants in the month of January. This is wraparound services, their case managers who provide this support, as well as helping our emergency voucher recipients secure homes, as well as providing resources and referrals to the rent supplement program. Next slide. Our fatherhood initiative, cohort 28, graduation, this was the most attended graduation that we've had. An alumni from cohort 24 came as a guest speaker. Our Fatherhood Ties program, which is a program where we participated in the Elements for Success program study kickoff, occurred on January 18th. And then there was a midpoint check-in for our fathers to discuss how this program is working for them. Next slide. In terms of the voucher program, 96 families were issued vouchers in January, and are searching. 183 contracts are pending execution. And we received 7 requests for voucher extensions in the month of January. Next slide. We continue to report out as a data point for the board and the commission, to see that we are still encouraging individuals to utilize the online Rent Cafe portal. You see that a little over half of the customers did use that resource. And we did have 52 customers that were recommended for termination in January. And the reason for those recommendations are outlined below. Based on the work that our resident services team was able to do, we were able to help 26 families not proceed with termination, and we will continue to provide support to any other families we are able to get in touch with. Next slide. In our emergency housing vouchers program, we have 118 EHVs. We have 104 families that have successfully leased, 5 that are searching, and we do not have any current packets from HHS. So we are very close to meeting our full capacity there. Next slide. The Family Self-Sufficiency Program increased to 368 participants. 3 families graduated in the month of January, and there was a vision board workshop that took place, as well as providing resources to our participants in regards to February free tax return preparation. Next slide. Our maintenance division is also on the move and really thinking proactively about how to reduce our maintenance expenditures, and is rolling out a new biannual preventive maintenance plan. This is a unit by unit inspection, focused really on our scattered sites in particular. The goal is to improve the performance at those scattered sites and to increase the lifespan, and to, of course, also increase resident satisfaction and retention. Next slide. And our mortgage finance team is continuing to do great work, especially as it pertains to our single family mortgage program. And there are some spotlights here in regards to the positive feedback that we receive. And our team provided this for our reference, but as you can see, Prime Lending Mortgage gave a wonderful quote about one of the homeowners being a young person buying his first home, how much it meant to him, and how extremely grateful he is for this opportunity. There's also another quote from Embrace Home Loans. Just wanted you to know how much this new homeowner appreciated your partnership and her successful closing on her new home. So, of course, one of the areas in which we have a great deal of pride is being able to provide the keys to someone and provide those resources for them to become a homeowner, and wanted to spotlight and appreciate the team for their great work. Next slide. And in regards to real estate, in January, we produced 3 significant accomplishments, and that was the site plan amendment for Building B was accepted on January 24th, and Georgia and Court Apartments Complex achieved full construction completion, and Shady Grove Apartments reached substantial completion. There's only minor work remaining to do, but we've already fully leased back up at stabilization. And with that, next slide, I conclude my report and open for questions and/or comments.
I don't have a question, but just a comment and mainly directed to the rest of the commissioners. I listened to both of the podcasts, the Odd Lots by Bloomberg News and the I Hate Politics. And I just want to say that Zach did a great job representing HOC, articulating what makes HOC unique, a lot of information about the Housing Production Fund. I strongly recommend that other commissioners, if you get a chance, listen to it. I think I think there's a lot that is educational in terms of, as I say, what makes HOC unique, how how HPF, the Housing Production Fund, is structured, and what's really different about that as well. So I think I strongly recommend it, and I commend Zach for doing such a good job, representing HOC.
I would like to commend you on undertaking the preventive maintenance plan. I think that is an excellent undertaking that can help in so many ways, not only with the maintenance of the buildings, but with the budgeting and many other aspects of that. I know that, gosh, I may be the only person who was on the budget committee at the time, but about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a maintenance analysis that was done by some outside consultants. it was looking at the multifamily, not the scattered sites. But if you want to put the two together to get the big picture, it may be worth digging that out from 3 or 4 years ago, since it was attempting to do the same thing for the multifamily properties as this appears to be trying to do for the scattered site. And I applaud both efforts to give us an opportunity to be ready for maintenance and accomplish it before it becomes an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's Sean Asbury did a great job with that. So
Thank you very much for the report. And we're going to be something a little different again from the agenda is that the presentation is going to be made very soon to the county council at their request related to the housing production fund. So we thought it'd be appropriate for the commission to get an update on where we are with the housing production fund. And so with that, I'll turn it back to you, President Andrews. You want to see with that?
yes, and in fact, right before that, and one of the same presenters, and I apologize, it's not outlined on the agenda, but we also want to provide a legislative update. There's a lot that has transpired here recently, and we want to make sure that we update you all in real time. So I've asked Ken Silverman, our Vice President of Government Affairs, to provide that presentation. And when he concludes that, Zachary Marks will join him and we will provide the HPF update as well. Thank you.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good evening, commissioners. For the record, Ken Silverman, Vice President of Government Affairs. There's quite a lot going on, so we thought breaking this out from the president's report would just be helpful to provide a little more space for questions or comments at the discussion the commission might want to have. Next slide, please. So just wanted to start with a flashback to the legislative priorities that the commission approved late last year. Next slide, please. And here's the sort of overall summary of those priorities. So I think you will see in some of the items here some resonance. I'm not going to say that all of the proposals that are good are 100% because the commission put these priorities out into the universe, but I'm not saying that. Next slide, please. So I wanted to start with a budget update. It's budget season all around. So sort of in order of worst to best news, I think. The HUD budget, you all read the news as well as I can. So the current CR for HUD extends through March 1st. That's the new D-Day for a shutdown. As we talked about, I think last month, at this point, because we're in the new calendar year, a shutdown would impact the housing assistance payment funding. And so we would, have to come back to the commission quickly and talk about a contingency plan for how to bridge any gap there. The two bills continue to move through the houses. I think you all have as much clarity as I do about, what may actually happen in this Congress. The governor's budget proposal is much better news. He's proposed adding $115 million over last year's number to the capital funds that are available for housing production. That is very good for the state overall. Just an asterisk for HOC that there is an internal policy that DHCD has that makes it so that it's not advantageous for HOC to access those funds. And that's a conversation that is part of our legislative priorities. And we have engaged with DHCD on that. There is some openness to revisit it, but they have not as of yet. So definitely continuing that conversation. And making sure that, as we visit with legislators and others, that people are kind of aware. Our understanding is that, there are projects across the state that would, far more than account for even the almost $300 million number. So even if we were able to apply, it certainly would still be a very competitive set of funds. And then looking at the county executive is proposing essentially adding $100 million over the sort of pre-planned level of affordable housing funds. And it breaks down in two. So he's included $50 million in his capital budget, and he's announced that with his operating budget in March, he will propose an additional $50 million in capital funding. And the reason to wait is to make sure that, the revenue projections that he receives between now and then remain as rosy as we all hope they will. The ultimate kind of bottom line there is that the NPPF, which we will discuss later tonight, would have $50 million in total funding. And the HIF, which is the county's housing trust fund, would have over $100 million just for FY25. So very positive for the county. Next slide, please. Just quickly wanted to highlight the Wyden-Smith tax package. Includes two very positive changes to the LIHTC program that, that did pass the House. Unclear what will happen in the Senate. But if it were to pass, it would be, result in, I think, a substantial increase in the amount of LIHTC funding available for Maryland. Next slide, please. Now looking at the state, the governor has released a housing package of 3 bills. We've talked a little bit about this, but we now have text and some more information. In Annapolis, they're calling this a housing session. This is really the governor's, top item in his legislative agenda for this year. They're definitely putting, heavy weight behind it. I think one refrain that we're hoping to, lead with legislators is that this is wonderful, but we don't just need a housing session. Really, we need like a housing decade, to get through all of the backlog that we need to address here in Maryland. A quick summary, the 3 bills. The first one is primarily a land use bill, basically overrides local authority on zoning and on development review. This one is uncertain, exactly what the impact would be on Montgomery County, because we do already have a lot of the provisions that the bill is mandating. So the ultimate result, we wouldn't know until a bill is passed, and then the county goes back and integrates it into its zoning code and process. And then we would have until that happens, we won't have a perfectly clear picture. And I know on next week at the Administrative and Regulatory Committee, we're going to have a broader discussion about land use and development process and all the proposals to impact that. So we'll get into much more detail there. The second bill is renters' rights, and the headline, really of the bill overall, but certainly for HOC, is that it would produce about $15 million additional statewide for the new statewide voucher program, which we would administer here in Montgomery County. And then it would also mandate a preference for 50% of those vouchers to go to families with a pregnancy or a child under 5 years old. And then the final bill would create a new state entity. The stated intent is for that entity to apply for and then allocate new market tax credits. The authorizing legislation is really quite broad. So there are any number of other financing tools that entity could potentially get into. Next slide, please. And then, so 2 kind of more narrower bills that I just wanted to focus in on. And there are several more bills in the memo that you should have received along with this. And then I have a much longer list of sort of bills that we are tracking at the staff level, just to see if there's any impact on HOC. But highlighting these 2. So the first one you've seen before. This is the local bill that would remove some of the requirements in HOC's authorizing code. One thing I wanted to highlight here. So this bill has passed the local delegation because of local courtesy. That means it's extremely likely to pass through the rest of the process. And we have had contact with members of the council's Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, who are interested in sponsoring a county bill, because there is a similar requirement in the county code. And so to sort of follow through and make this effective, we would need the county to remove that requirement. And I think you'll see that coming soon. I don't have exact date of when that is likely to be introduced or a draft, but as soon as we have that information, we'll share it with the commission. And then the second one is HB 7. This was HB 60 last year, would create a new statewide fund loosely modeled off of the HPF, but the upshot is that it would potentially provide matching funds for the HPF for us here. There is definitely some, seems to be more attention and movement on this bill than last year. And so I think there is a decent chance that this gets passed and that there's some money allocated. Exactly how much that is, I think, we'll have to wait and see. But that would be, a very positive step. And I think one of the things we've been doing is starting to have conversations with some of our colleagues in other jurisdictions around Maryland to talk about, how they could benefit from a program like this, because I think that's been one of the roadblocks, is that last year it was really perceived as a Montgomery County item because, no one else has an HOC that's sort of ready to go. Next slide, please. And then I wanted to highlight some county legislation. So this Council Bill 3823, this one you've also seen before. This is the bill modifying the right of first refusal to allow the county to assign that right to nonprofits, and is sort of related to the NPPF, which we will discuss later. This ZTA 2310 removes parking minimums from the zoning code near transit, and you can see the sort of the definition of near transit there. Seems very likely to pass. I think every council member is a co-sponsor. It's always a good sign. And then 2401, which I think could be very meaningful and certainly echoes, HOC's work with Emory Grove. Basically would allow either religious institutions or private schools that have what used to be called special exceptions are now called conditional uses in the zoning code to operate in detached residential zones. Would allow them to, without getting a new conditional use or changing the zoning, build affordable housing on that property. There's quite a bit of detail about how dense that can be and what kind of forms and all that, but it would allow it to be much denser than what is allowed in the underlying zone. So that could be a big benefit in certain locations. It's certainly a very common development pattern to have churches or other religious institutions and private schools, and a lot of them have big unused parking lots or other spare land that could be repurposed. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you.
Ask you a question.
Yes, please.
Could you go back to the last slide? The one on the reduction of residential parking requirements and ranges of a half a mile and a quarter of a mile. I was kind of wondering what kind of analysis was provided in terms of the number of potential parking spaces that would be saved by this particular bill.
Yeah, I don't have a number off the top of my head. I'd like to get it for you and send it. I know one of the challenges with doing that kind of analysis is that although there are parking minimums, there are elements of the zoning code that allow planning to waive those. And I think already they frequently do in those, CBDs and really tight, transit oriented areas. So, the practical impact is that it does save developers from having to, trying to figure out how they can have that conversation, how they can get those waivers. It creates a new default. But I can definitely provide you with what are the current standards and what's being eliminated.
Other question was whether or not this would apply to existing developments that are in the same range. For example, it may, it wouldn't help you if you had underground parking. But if you had surface parking, it may allow you to capture some of that space for reuse. Could be an open park or could be another thing you can do with it. Now, I'm wondering, does it apply only to new construction or does it apply for existing?
That's a good question. I mean, it certainly would only apply where there is a development application that somebody's moving forward, but I think it would not likely remove, let me look and send you a response to that. I don't want to say something that's wrong. But yeah.
Thank you. We now want to transition to providing an update on the Housing Production Fund. As previously stated, we've been asked to come to the council on this upcoming Monday to provide an update on the HPF. Ultimately, what you will hear is that we are at capacity. We are meeting the objectives in terms of affordability, and many times, of course, as you all know, going deeper in affordability, as well as focusing on the type of projects that the council envisioned, which are projects that are near transportation, have environmentally friendly attributes. And so to ensure that you've had an opportunity to see what will be presented, we're going to walk through some slides. I'm going to take liberty to go through the first few just to provide a quick, this is what we're showing. You already know this data. And when we get to the points where it might be new information, pause so that we can share. This is a new slide, a new visual. And so if you can move to the next slide. And team, I'll do the first few slides and then hand it over. This is our standard introduction where we outline for individuals or the public just who we are and how we're structured. This is the same format that we've used in our previous presentations and has been previously displayed, of course, to the commission and to the council. And this is also, of course, sent to you all. Next slide. This is also a very standard slide that we use that outlines how the HPF operates. So it's what we used in the past as well. And it just outlines how the fund is created, that it focuses on construction and how many units we anticipate being able to create with this additional resource. Next slide. This is a slide that highlights and identifies the really key component of the HPF, not needing to tap into the low-income housing tax credit program, which is extremely taxed already. And so it highlights that you can create the same amount of units, affordable units, and in many instances, larger projects with the Housing Production Fund. And that's what this slide does. Next slide. We talk about our the benefits of public ownership. There are benefits to home ownership as well. But in this slide, we focus on the residents and how we're able to continue to provide resources for residents that are in our Housing Production Fund locations, as well as ultimately ensure long-term affordability for those projects. Next slide. This is a slide that was included in the previous presentation before the council as well, that was highlighting how our agency has impacted the economy over the last 15 years by providing over $3 billion of economic, spurring economic activity in the county. Next slide. This is also a slide that was used in our last presentation to the council, just giving an overview of the timeline in which the legislation passed and how quickly we were able to deploy the resources. Some of these slides, since they are redundant, may not be included in that public-facing portion of the presentation to the council, but would probably be still included in their packets for their reference. Next slide. And this is where we highlight the fact that our projects are transient oriented and across the county, and shows our current phases 1 and 2 projects, where they're located and where our future HPF projects will be located. Next slide. We spotlight the laureate, and of course, we've spoken a lot about the laureate, so just highlighting how successful this first proof of concept has been for us and for the county. Next slide. We highlight the fact that Hillendale Gateway is in the pipeline to utilize HPF, and how it also meets those criteria in terms of affordability and environmentally friendly. There will also be some additional information that spotlights how it really is activating a new part of our county on the east side. Next slide. We also began to publicly preview the fact that with Building B, we are going to utilize the HPF, and this is instrumental in ensuring that we're able to continue to fully activate that resource. And so this will be the first time the council sees this particular project, but also an opportunity for them to know that we are completing what was envisioned in that sector, in that area at Shady Grove. Next slide. We spotlight our efforts at Wheaton Gateway and give some timeline, letting the council know that we are still working towards our development there, and that we're beginning phases 1 and 2 with a groundbreaking estimated in FY26. But this is also going to be a project where HPF will make a huge difference in terms of the amount of affordability we will be able to bring to this project. The next slide. Avondale is also included. This is, of course, to be determined in terms of when, but something that will ultimately come to the board for consideration, and is something that a project that was anticipated as leveraging the HPF. Next slide. Forest Glen Park and Ride also identified in the pipeline. And these are all projects that when we went to the council were identified and also presented to the commission as potential projects for the HPF, but ultimately still require board approval. So these are projects that are underway. And next slide. And as we all know, Elizabeth House 4 is also a project that in the future is anticipated to benefit from the HPF. I will turn to the team on this creative last slide that we have and allow an opportunity to share what we're presenting here, ultimately being able to demonstrate how, and next slide, please, how additional resources could potentially continue to accelerate the work we're doing with the HPF.
Thank you, President Andrews. Yeah, the intent of this slide is really to indicate that, you know, from conception in 2021, we really are reaching kind of cruising altitude here. And so what you can see in the bottom right in terms of the chart demonstrate really we're going to be headed toward full utilization of the 100 million and even past the initial revolution of the first 50, pretty immediate re-implementation of that. And so you can see both in 26, 28, 29, at that point, you're pretty much at full utilization through FY29 of the full 100 million. So it really is the full realization of, you know, the 21 and 22 budget approvals. So that's great. It's a big moment. And you can also see the pretty dramatic shift in the shaded portion of that bottom right slide also shows you cumulative unit count, and you can really see the impact of the second 50 showing up. That's really where that slope kicks up. And then you can also see the plateau toward 29 because of the full utilization of the 100 at that point. In the top right, it gives a nice illustration of how the different projects really flow one to the next, and how the revolving nature of the fund allows these projects really to be lined up in really kind of an orderly fashion. And that, we're able to project all the way out to FY29. That is part of the intent of the HPF, was to give you all a set of resources significant enough to be able to plan that far out. And as we all know, design entitlement projects in Montgomery County take a really long time, and you have to often commit to them several years in advance. And it's harder to commit if you don't know the resources are there. So the intent of the HPF was to let the commission feel more comfortable that the resources are there. So it makes it easier to commit. And as a result, what you see here is a pretty orderly and significant pipeline. And then our talking points along the left side, just get into more detail about this idea that really we have done what the council intended us to do as a part of providing us these resources. And so, but what we're finding is that in fact, there is significant additional demand, identified demand beyond what we already have programmed. A good deal of that is coming from this private sector pause related to conventional financing not penciling in the current, to some extent, construction cost environment, but really it's a rate environment that is making it more difficult for private sector actors to close their transactions. And so we are getting access to an extremely high quality private sector pipeline to potentially choose from. As President Andrews mentioned, these are all developments that are very high quality. They are transit oriented and in many cases transformative beyond just the housing element. That we have clearly proved the concept. We have the ability to build upon that, but it also comes with a discussion around the fact that the 100 million really is utilized through FY29. So what do we do about that? And then piled on top of all of that is the ZTA from this past summer that now gives access to HPF projects by way of the affordability commitments to a much more streamlined, accelerated entitlement approval, which on one hand is great because it saves a lot of money and you can get to start faster, but it's, the original 5-year revolution of the fund, is still 5 years. So if these projects are being approved faster, there's also a question of sort of what do we do, because 100 million revolving every 5 years, isn't happening any faster. But if the entitlement process is, we need to understand what it means that we can get things entitled faster here, but does it matter if you can't fund them faster? So there's definitely some really strong trends that when we initially worked on the HPF, we kind of academically knew they were true, but we're starting to see them, I guess beyond starting, we're really seeing them happen in real time now around its effectiveness. Thank you.
One of the things I was really comment about, which comes across very well, when you run through the list of developments, is the spatial diversity of where the projects are located. And I think that's really important. As we look at where we use resources and where we connect our resources to where we know there are changes going to be happening demographically, and we can begin to address that. So I think that really comes across very well in this display. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. We'll also send out information in regards to that meeting and the link if anyone is interested in watching us provide this report to the council on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you, team.
What I'm going to do is I see that the Vice President of the Resident Advisory Board has come in the room. So before we move to the approval of minutes, I'm going to provide the opportunity for her to come forward and speak to us. So we have two officers of the RAB here today. I know you are. Yeah. President, let me not move you down.
Well,
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? I mean, there I go again. Just forgive me. Um, my name's Irma Washington, and I'm the president of the Montgomery County RAD Board, Residential Advocacy right, Board. And
My name is Adam Pinchuk, and I am the Vice President of the Resident Advisory Board.
we're just here to get this evening to give you an update. It's getting better. We had our last meeting. You got, thank you. We have been in function since October, as you know, and we have met 3 times since. I've been here. This is my 3rd time. It's a pleasure. Our last meeting was January the 22nd. And we met with Mr. Jonathan. Well, let me just, we updated on some of the things that are happening. We got some refreshers on what the board is still working on, issues and things that we may be able to bring, or ideas that we may think of. The last time I was here, sir, you asked me what was some of the things that we have started to do, but we're still kind of new, and we're still we're seeing things that hopefully maybe the next time we come, we'll give you an input of that, of where we're going. Old business, we went over the last minutes from December. We decided to we met with the board, and we decided to have an option of in-person and audio. We also met with Mr. Jonathan Catania with the fatherhood program. As you see, I'm smiling. I think that's a very good program. He gave us a lot of information. It was very informative. He was very professional. He gave to the point where when I walked in the door, I already had a referral of a young man of a father who needed that program. So it was really a rewarding experience to hear from the beginning of the end of the program. And I'm going to let Adam give us.
Okay, so to expand a little bit upon what President Washington talked about, we did pass 3 resolutions unanimously at the last meeting. The first was to formalize both hybrid attendance, which could be either remote, but with an emphasis on in-person attendance at each meeting. The second important thing that we passed was a rule on attendance. And we agreed that any member who misses 3 consecutive RAB meetings without contacting either President Washington or Ms. Harris should then be removed from the board. And so we're in the process of formulating our policies and procedures to sort of implement that going forward. And the third item that we also passed unanimously was to request more information on the use of third-party private management companies and in their involvement with housing opportunity owned properties, with a particular attention to oversight by HOC of these third-party contractors. We wanted to get some more information on what properties are managed directly by HOC, which properties are managed by third-party contractors, what is the oversight procedures, what are the metrics for measuring performance, what is the accountability standards, and what policies and procedures are available to residents for any grievances. So those were the 3 major initiatives that we passed during our last meeting. And I think that covers the majority of our meeting last month.
Very good. Are there any questions from commissioners?
Vice President, I did think, Vice President, I just wanted to know now, you said something about the third party. Are you talking about landlords?
We're talking about private management companies that are managing HOC owned properties. Yes.
Are y'all asking for maybe information about the landlords
So right now, what we're doing is sort of information gathering. So we would like to speak to people at HOC who are in charge of oversight, maybe contracts, contract retention, contracts that are going out possibly in the future. So we're just trying to get information. We would like to speak to some of these private management companies as well. Miss Washington and I have had conversations offline outside of the board meetings where she has expressed that at the property where she lives, she's had some difficulties with the private property management company that manages the property where she lives at HOC, and that other residents have also come to her with similar grievances. And we thought this was something that the board should investigate and just look into and gather some information on.
Just to enlighten it a little bit, it becomes very stressful, and usually during the time of recertification. Seems to be a lot of staff that I can't really put this in what I want to say, but staff not being familiar with
Right.
what their qualifications should be in helping or giving the information to the residents. And it's a lot of turnovers. And it's a lot of not monitoring the property managers are not really being monitored as to what they're supposed to be doing for the property. So we end up having a lot of our questions and things going to the maintenance.
And
So
I agree with you because we do pay the landlords. So that's something that you should ask for and get. And I hope once you do that, we get a copy of that because we vote for these landlords. We vote for these different landlords every year. So that's something that I've always wanted to know more about. So yes, once and I will be at y'all next meeting. Once you find out that information, I'm pretty sure Ms. Harris will send it to me. Thank
yes,
you.
most definitely.
I'll just add to what Commissioner Kroom is saying. I think, and I appreciate that the advisory board is looking into this or gathering this information. As Commissioner Kroom noted, we are asked to, renew contracts, for these property managers on an annual basis. And I think for us on the commission, there have been times where, it would just be very helpful to get the advisory board's perspective on the issues that we should be considering. I don't expect any property manager to be complaint-free, but the more information that we have helps us evaluate whether we should be renewing certain contracts or not.
Yes, and it's very important because like he said, a lot of my residents come to me and they're being told things outside of their lease that they have to be responsible for, but there's no recent or update paperwork, or there's nothing documented showing that from now on we don't cut your grass. Okay, or things like, so just that is really, really, as far as what you were saying, sir, of us getting something on our plate, may I say it like that, to do, that is taking priority as far as I'm concerned.
It would be interesting is you referenced where you live. It'd be interesting to hear what your board members think about the same property manager at other sites to see if it's a systemic problem or just the staff at one property. It's not to say the property manager gets a pass.
Well, I can
But just
tell you this much, sir. I'm sorry to interrupt
No,
you.
go ahead.
I can tell you this much. I monitor 2 properties, Town Center and Sandy Spring, and they all come to me. So it's just not that one.
But the same property manager.
Same property.
No,
manager. Yes, sir.
that's terribly important.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. sir.
Thank you for your time.
And also to your point, during our meeting, other board members who live in HOC properties that are managed by HOC actually relayed very positive information about their experience. So we're curious as to the difference between HOC managed properties by HOC and HOC properties that are managed by third-party private contractors. and whether or not that also needs to be looked at and examined for quality.
It'd be interesting to know how a problem like this gets dealt with at the HOC level, how the complaints flow up. I don't know the answer, but it would be interesting to know so that you don't have to wait for the renewal of the management contract.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you for raising this.
One point that I just want to raise is that, as you all know, we are transitioning also to Rent Cafe, and to Yardi. Rent Cafe is going to be a tool that allows us to get customer service feedback on every touch point. When a maintenance request is completed, to when they have an interaction with one of our staff or third-party staff. We've totally deployed it at Cider Mill. And so that will allow us to have ongoing feedback on performance. And we've also intertwined that into our new contracts in terms of how we will make determinations on renewals. So we are definitely focused on improving the customer experience, but also leveraging technology as much as we can. And then if ever there are calls, so someone doesn't use Rent Cafe, then we do have protocols in place to help elevate it to our staff that are responsible for overseeing those contracts. And we have a full structure. And then sometimes there have been vacancy challenges with getting those positions, but we're getting fully staffed in maintenance to be able to provide that level of oversight, fully staffed in property management and maintenance to be able to provide that level of oversight for our third-party properties.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much, and glad to see you all, and look forward to seeing you next month in March.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Roy, something that might be interesting is before we approve a new management contract or renewal is to ask the RAB what their experience has been. Or otherwise, or Chelsea, you collect, whatever's appropriate. But that might be useful because we have no idea.
Yeah, it sounded like the structure of what you're doing with Rent Cafe will in fact generate that kind of information. So we will have input that comes from the RAD or from residents that simply says, this is how we evaluate the services we have or have not received from a third-party management company. So, I just think it's clearly that, staff and RAD work together and we'll be able to provide information that we all can be and find useful.
And absolutely. And one of the key considerations of getting live data is sometimes it's not just the company, it could be the staff person or the team that's there. And so being able to give that feedback that this is not a good fit in live real time, the question for me is how quickly can you make the adjustment that we need you to make? And of course, unfortunately, there's turnover in that particular field, and that area is really difficult in terms of stabilization, but understanding that we're expecting high quality customer service at all times is what we're imparting on our third party property managers.
I'd say turnover is a colossal problem in the management area. It's just nationwide. It's a terrible problem.
President Andrews, are we collecting surveys from our residents regarding the property management companies?
Yes, that's what we're beginning to deploy with our rollout of Rent Cafe across the portfolio. So as we roll it out, that feature is available, and then we're having to do training and ensure that people know how to take advantage of that. And that's the same tool that we're now also leveraging to have mass communication to all of our residents and rent collection as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Perhaps you could provide the resident advisory board a little summary of that and how it works and how they could also help their fellow residents use that tool so that the information does get reported up to us. That'd be great.
That would be good. And I know that there's a timeline in place in terms of how different properties are being brought into this system. So we could provide that as well.
Thank you very much. The last item under information exchange is commissioner exchange. Is there anything that commissioners want to exchange?
Yeah, I had just one thing just to bring the attention to the commissioners. I was going to mention the podcast as well, but mentioned that earlier. Just wanted to highlight a recent report that came out from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies on America's rental housing. The the report was titled 2024, but it had data from 2022, just showing the level of cost burden that renters are facing in this country has reached record levels, and that for the first time in the entire United States, more than 50% of renters are cost burdened, which means that they are paying greater than 30% of their income towards their rent. And that's 22.4 million Americans, and 12.1 million Americans are severely cost burdened, which means they're paying more than 50% of their income towards their rent. And in Maryland, it's also a record high, and nearly as much, with nearly half, 49.9% of residents of the state are cost burdened, and 26.2% are severely cost burdened. And so that's just kind of a snapshot of, some of the challenges that we're facing, and, the important, it sort of illustrates the important role that HOC plays. But wanted to sort of bring that report to the attention of the commissioners.
Very good. Harvard materials I always look at because of the fact that my life at HUD, they were in fact part of the I would say the policy underpinning for a lot of the policies that HUD pursued came out of the studies that were done at Harvard. So good materials. Let me go on to Northern Exchange. In one of the documents there was came out to the commissioners. There was a reference to the emergency rental assistance compliance study being done, and take a look at that, because they were talking about it was someone who was trying to market their skills to help authorities get ready for this emergency rental assistance compliance review is being done. So just take a look at that. It was in, I got it on, on platform we get information for. Just pay attention to that. With that, let me move forward with the approval of minutes. We have approval of minutes of January 10th, 2024, and also closed session meetings of the same day. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
Commissioner Byrd, so moved.
And moved and seconded to approve the respective minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
nay. So ordered. We will now go into our committee reports and recommendations for actions. The first report will come from Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee. This item deals with the procurement of management services. How interesting that we just talked about that. But there's an approval for selecting a management agent for Hillendale Gateway. This was presented to the Budget and Finance Committee, and who recommended this be presented to the full commission for your approval. So with that, I'll turn to President Andrews.
Yes, and Vice President of Property Management, Ali Ozair, will provide this recommendation. I will just give a preview. The next 4 items, this item plus 3 additional, are all focused on moving us forward with Hillendale.
Thank you, President Andrew. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here to present to you staff's recommendation to approve Bozzuto as the property management agent for Hillendale Gateway. The RFP was issued on August 30, 2023, and 4 proposals were received from Edgewood Management, Bozzuto, Caprit, and Habitat. The BF&A committee reviewed this request during the December 20, 2023 meeting, and joined the staff's recommendation that the commission accept the recommendation to select Bozzuto as the property management agent for Hillendale Gateway. This agreement will allow for HOC to engage with Bozzuto during the construction phase to ensure that the property is positioned to resonate with prospective residents and will continue to deliver sustained value in the future. There will be no associated costs with these services during the construction phase. During the lease-up phase, the services will begin approximately 2 to 3 months prior to delivery of the first unit, and is when the management agent will have on-site staff employed and working to prepare the building for opening. During the lease-up phase, Bozzuto will charge a $18,000 per month fixed fee. After the first 6 months of leasing, This fee will be converted to a performance-based fee, meaning that if Bozzuto fails to meet the agreed-upon leasing schedule, the monthly fee will be reduced accordingly to a floor of 70% of the base lease-up fee. The lease-up phase will end once the property reaches 95% occupancy, at which point the management fee will convert to $58.33 per unit per month for occupied units only. A retail management fee of $1,000 per month will also commence at this point for the retail portion of the building. If approved, there will not be a budget impact to the fiscal year 24 operation budget. Lease-up services outlined herein will be paid for by the Hillendale Gateway development budget. Once the property is stabilized, the stabilized management services will be paid for by property operations. Staff recommends that the commission authorize the president to negotiate and execute a 2-year property management contract with 2 one-year renewal options for Hillendale Gateway with Bozzuto. Thank you.
Can I get a motion to approve resolution 24-09?
So moved.
Second.
Been probably moving the second to approve resolution 2409. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. So ordered. Motion approved unanimously. We will now turn to the Development Finance Committee chaired by Commissioner Markowitz.
Thank you, Chair Priest. As President Andrews noted, we have several items also related to Hillendale Gateway. First one having to do with authorizing additional funding for legal services. And I will turn it over to President Andrews.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Catherine Hollister, our Housing Acquisition Manager, to provide more details.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Catherine Hollister, Housing Acquisition Manager in the Real Estate Division. On page 32 of your brief book, you'll find the memo for this item. Staff is requesting approval of additional legal services provided by Gallagher, Avelius and Jones LLP for Hillendale Gateway. In October 2021, HOC obtained quotes from 3 firms within its legal pool for legal services and transactional work for Hillendale Gateway. Gallagher, Avelius and Jones LLP, which I'll refer to as GEJ, provided the lowest bid, and HOC engaged GEJ for an amount not to exceed $200,000. Since that initial engagement with GEJ, the Hillendale Gateway project has evolved in a number of ways, requiring additional legal services in 3 main areas. The first is for LIHTC transactional work for the non-age restricted building. The second is for construction related easements and agreements. And the third is to provide lender counsel services. GEJ has provided an estimate for these additional services in an amount not to exceed $160,000, which when combined with the initial engagement of $200,000 would bring the total legal engagement to an amount that exceeds the president's awarding authority and requires commission approval. Staff proposes that the additional services in the amount of $160,000 plus a $32,000 contingency for a total of $192,000 be approved. The Hillendale Gateway development budget has sufficient funding to pay for these additional services. The resolution for this item can be found on page 35 of your brief book. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? If not, I will move that the commission approve resolution 2410.
Second.
It's been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-10. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposers, nay. So ordered. I don't have a question about the motion at all, but wondered with the selection of the legal counsel, will we now have a complete development team in place now for Hillendale?
Yes, we have they're already engaged. This is just additional services provided by that same firm.
Okay.
Yep.
The next item, also having to do with Hillendale Gateway, relates to the possibility of entering into ground leases, some sub-ground leases, I guess, with Hillendale.
As the Development and Finance Committee was advised, we were under negotiations as it pertained to this request. We are still in that posture, so we are taking proactive steps to afford an opportunity to enter into these ground leases if needed. I will turn it over to Catherine Hollister to provide additional details.
Again, for the record, my name is Catherine Hollister, Housing Acquisition Manager in the Real Estate Division. On page 37 of your brief book, you'll find the memo for this item. Staff is requesting approval for HOC at Hillendale AR LLC and HOC at Hillendale NAR LLC to enter into ground leases directly with Hillendale Pad 2 LLC in the event it is required by Hillendale Gateway's capital partners. As a way of background, HOC is developing Hillendale Gateway as part of a joint venture with the Duffy Companies. The joint venture entity, Hillendale Gateway LLC, is majority owned and controlled by HOC. Hillendale Gateway LLC controls the Hillendale Gateway site through a 99-year ground lease with Hillendale Pad 2 LLC, a Duffy affiliated entity. In September 2023, the commission approved a final development plan for Hillendale Gateway, which authorized the creation of a condominium regime on the property and for Hillendale Gateway LLC to enter into subleases with the ultimate owners of the various condominium units. While this sublease structure is similar to previous HOC transactions, Hillendale Gateway's capital partners have expressed some initial concerns. HOC staff and council are working through these issues and believe we've resolved them in the current sublease structure. However, if these concerns cannot be fully resolved, our financing partners may require that the two LIHTC condos enter into direct ground leases with Hillendale Pad 2 LLC. So in the event it is required by our capital partners, staff is requesting commission approval for HOC at Hillendale AR LLC, which is the LIHTC condo that owns 155 affordable units within the age-restricted building, and HOC at Hillendale NAR LLC, which is the LIHTC owner of 93 affordable units within the non-age restricted building, enter into ground leases directly with Hillendale Pad 2 LLC. The resolution for this item can be found on the next page of your brief book. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from the commissioners? If not, I will make a motion that we approve resolution 2411 to enter into the ground leases directly with Hillendale.
I
That-
second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-11. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
The final item having to do with Hillendale Gateway today is relates to approval to authorize a number of bonds to help finance the projects.
And for this request, I'm turning it over to our mortgage finance team. And Victoria Dixon, our senior multifamily underwriter, will present this presentation.
Good evening, Victoria Dixon, Senior Multifamily Underwriter with the Mortgage Finance Department. I'm returning to request approval of the bond authorizing resolutions for the Hillendale Gateway with applicable actions. In September and November of last year, the commission approved the use of up to 43 million on the real estate line of credit to provide a bridge loan to the Hillendale transaction and the respective finance plans for both buildings with an allocation of up to 77 million volume cap. We are subsequently returning to the commission for approval of the corresponding bond authorizing resolutions of up to $150 million and $47 million to issue the tax exempt indebtedness to finance the buildings. If you would go to page 45 of your package. As part to meet the 50% test for the NAR LIHTC component and utilize the volume cap allocation of up to 30 million, staff proposes issuance of the tax exempt private activity bonds in the form of both long-term bonds under the 1996 indenture and short-term draws on the relock. Determination of the final amounts are subject to interest rate movements, but currently estimated to be up to 23 million of the 1996 indenture bonds and approximately 7 million on the relock. Therefore, to accommodate the short-term tax exempt need for the transaction, staff is requesting the commission approve to utilize the relock to provide the tax exempt draws of up to 7 million. This will increase expected usage of the relock from 43 to 50 million for the transaction. A summary of the bond authorizing resolutions is provided for your consideration on page 46. The next page, please. Scroll down. There you go. And finally, does the commission wish to accept staff's recommendation, which is supported by the Development and Finance Committee, to approve the bond authorizing resolutions and the tax exempt usage of the relock for up to 7 million?
Are there questions from the commission? I will just note that this issue was fully discussed at the Development and Finance Committee meeting, and the committee supported these resolutions to issue these bonds. And it's just great to see the progress we're making and moving forward with Hillendale. So, and with that, I will make a motion that we approve resolutions 2412A, 2412B, and 2412C that authorize these bond issuances.
Commissioner Byrd, I second.
It has been probably moved and seconded to approve resolutions 2412A, 2412B, and 2412C. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. So ordered. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to a different topic, scattered sites. Our next item has to do with entering into a letter of intent for the disposition of up to 10 units in Montgomery Village to Habitat for Humanity. President Andrews.
Yes, and the next two items are related to scattered sites. And as the commission recalls, we did present a comprehensive strategy around how to address our scattered sites. And so you will hear today two different approaches that we're taking and deploying. This first recommendation that's coming to you entails opportunity to leverage a relationship with one of our nonprofit partners in the county, Habitat for Humanity, and to advance opportunities for home ownership, affordable housing home ownership. And so I will turn it over to our real estate division and Jay Shepard, our housing acquisition manager, to provide more details.
Thank you, President Andrews, and good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, I'm Jay Shepard, Housing Acquisition Manager in Real Estate Development. And this item starts on page 64 of the brief book. Staff met with the Development and Finance Committee in December and presented a multi-pronged strategy to address the reinvestment needs of the HOC scattered site portfolio. And today, as an extension of one of those strategies, we're focusing on disposition and the benefits of that micro approach. The packet outlines HOC's desire to sell 10 vacant and unencumbered, functionally obsolete, and with significant capital needs, single-family townhouses in an over-concentrated HOC ownership area in Montgomery Village. The 10 units are also without regulatory restrictions, and they're held in title by HOC. They were formerly held in HOC's MPDU 64 program, which consisted of 64 scattered site, townhouse, and single-family detached units, and again, primarily in Montgomery Village. In 2021, the first mortgage debt of $895,819.45 was retired, and thereby release the underlying collateral on the 64 homes from that debt obligation. To retire that first mortgage, the commission drew on the $60 million PNC line of credit, and the entire balance remains outstanding with the obligation to pay interest only, which annually runs between $50,000 and $60,000. On page 67, we outlined why we chose these 10 units. We also provided a map showing the concentration of our footprint in the Montgomery Village submarket. The proposed buyer is Habitat for Humanity of Metro Maryland, which meets HOC's mission in several ways. One, they are a robust start to finish entity with the horsepower to carry out this transaction effortlessly. Second, it converts a rental unit to a homeownership unit, but keeps it into an affordability level between 35 and 63%. And that fits many of HOC's typical tenancy profiles. And third, it creates a pilot that could serve as a model for future dispositions on a scale of approximately 10 to 20 units per year. That's what they can handle. The sale price is $90,000 a unit, which is less than market. But again, it fulfills mission as we've outlined. It's also sufficient to retire the line of credit balance in its entirety, which stops the accrual of interest-only payments on the principal annually. Habitat has also, it will also pick up the associated closing costs for the transaction, and that's estimated between 3 and 3.5%. Habitat's new home ownership program maintains long-term affordability And they hold three keys really to prevent a quick flip from the buyer or from the buyer who actually takes it over. That includes a right of first refusal in the deed. There's a shared appreciation policy that promotes long-term wealth. And there's a silent second mortgage. We outline all those on page 71 in the packet. Lastly, and in addition to the budget impacts that we mentioned of reducing that line of credit liability, this disposition, the disposition eliminates the need to source funds to renovate each of these 10 units because they do need renovation. And this allows HOC to implement the other prongs that we've outlined in that overall reinvestment strategy for those scattered sites. We are therefore asking for your approval to divest of these 10 units and authorize staff to negotiate and the president to execute a letter of intent with Habitat for use in their program in accordance with their program restrictions. Staff would return to the commission again soon to seek the approval for the final disposition and purchase and sale agreement. And thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the commission?
Commissioner Byrd, what happens if the sale does not go through with Habitat? Will we still try to look for other potential buyers?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. My understanding is yes, we would, if for some reason that this transaction were to not proceed, we would seek other buyers.
And would we stand firm on our 90,000 per unit costs with Habitat?
Would we stand firm on our 90,000 with Habitat? Is that your
Yeah,
question?
that price per unit, you said we're selling at 90,000 per unit.
Correct.
So I know still everything is negotiable, but would we pretty much stand firm on that? Or is that still pending assessments?
It's a firm price.
Okay.
If it were to fall through with Habitat, I would assume that price would still apply to the new buyers. However, Habitat really, is providing something that's pretty unique in terms of a conversion from a rental unit to a home ownership unit. That area also suffers from not just high concentration of our ownership, but there's a high rental component in that market as well. And so this is a pretty unique opportunity, and Habitat's pretty committed to making this happen. So we actually don't believe that this will fall through.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And this area, is this townhouses?
These are townhouses.
Townhouses, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Before I make a motion, I would be remiss with former Commissioner Simon in the audience. I'd be remiss if I didn't note the importance of the scattered site portfolio to HOC, and that it is part of what makes HOC unique, and that we offer housing around the county, and so we don't take disposition lightly. But as noted, these are vacant properties, so they're not doing anyone any good right now. And it's great that we're partnering with another very mission-driven organization and to put these units to good use. So with that, I will make a motion that the commission approve resolution 2413.
Commissioner Byrd, I second.
It's been properly moved and second to approve resolution 24-13. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
And the next item on scattered sites has to do with the rehabilitation, the rehabilitation of additional units.
Yes, and commissioners, as you know, we are deploying each and every strategy we can think of to ensure that we're getting the best use out of our scattered sites. In this instance, you're presented with a recommendation as it pertains to renovating 10 of our scattered sites. This is the second time we've come to you. We anticipate coming again, and we're leveraging the resources that we've received from the county in the SIP, the County Improvement payments that we've received and ensuring that we are deploying them. And I will turn it over to our real estate team. I think Kimberly King, project manager, will provide this presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. For the record, my name is Kim King. I am a construction project manager with the real estate development team here at HOC. I am here to request the approval to execute a contract with Innovative Technology Design and Construction as the general contractor for various scattered site properties pursuant to IFB 2435. HOC owns over 1,600 scattered site units throughout Montgomery County, 24 different opportunity housing and low-income housing tax credit ownership entities. A majority of these units have not had renovation since acquisition, and we need to complete the renovations in order to continue to serve eligible households. All units are currently vacant and will be vacant during renovation. In accordance to HOC's current procurement policy, on November 16th of 2023, we sent out an invitation for bid 2435. It was issued for the scattered site units. The due date was December 14th. Upon receipt, we received 9 responses. Out of the 9, after review, we determined that only 6 were qualified, responsible, most qualified bidders. Next slide, please. Thank you. HOC receives $1,250,000 annually from the county's capital improvement program. In addition to the $1.25 million received for fiscal year 24, HOC has carried funding over from prior fiscal years that are available for the scattered site renovation program. The commission has approved fiscal year 24 CIP funding, including the funding for deeply subsidized unit renovations. Next slide, please. The scope of work. Within the scope of work, we will be completing interior and exterior remodels, full kitchen and bathrooms, new flooring, all new finishes, upgrades to the mechanical equipment, any safety, exterior handrails, that would be included. Most of the finishes and improvements are kind of the same across the board to keep the portfolio consistent. And next slide, please. In 2013, we started our renovation program with the VCP Unit 1s and 2s. Below, you'll find some great example of our finished products. Next slide, please. So our selection criteria, the contractors had to meet a minimum of 5 years experience, properly licensed in the state of Maryland, the proper insurance coverage, and a performance bond to cover the 100% cost of renovations. Below are the 6 qualified candidates that we picked from the bunch. And as you can see, Innovative Technology Design and Construction, they came in as the lowest, most qualified, responsive bidder. So as a staff, we propose the selection of Innovation Technology Design and Construction. We're asking to have approval to award the contract to this contractor for the 10 units because they are most qualified and they are a MBE contractor. Next slide, please. In conclusion, will the commission approve the selection of Innovative Technology Design and Construction for the general contractor of the 10 scattered site units in pursuant to IFB 2435, and also authorize the President Executive Director to negotiate and execute a contract with Innovative Technology Design and Construction for $1,238,535.64.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I do. Have this construction company ever did any work for HOC before?
They have not.
Um, just a general question. In terms of once the units are renovated, I'm assuming our own property management staff would do the lease up for these units, correct?
Yes, we manage our own stair site portfolio.
If there are no other questions, I will make a motion to approve resolution 2414. Second.
It's been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 2414. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
nay. So ordered, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move, we have now finished our committee reports, and we will now move to items requiring deliberation and or actions. And it's a presentation about the Nonprofit Preservation Fund and the role that HOC would play relative to the administration of that fund. President Andrews?
Yes, thank you, commissioners. In the summer, last summer, the council approved the creation of a new funding source targeted to nonprofits, targeted to preservation, and asked for HOC to help support that endeavor by providing underwriting support. What you will hear today is a high-level overview of what the arrangement and or agreement would be with the county in terms of the role that we play as underwriters, as well as giving some appreciation as it pertains to how we could, in some point in the future, leverage this resource. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ken Silverman, who will walk us through these terms. And just for context, these terms will not go back to the county. It won't be presented to the county in a formal setting in the council. It falls within their appropriation that they've already provided for this. However, in order to enter into the MOU, seeking the commission's support to move forward and to authorize us to enter into the MOU is what we're seeking.
Thank you, commissioners. Good evening. For the record, again, Ken Silverman, Vice President of Government Affairs. We have had some discussions about this last summer. And when the program was initially approved by the council and the funding was programmed. And since then, been working with our mortgage finance team, with our legal team, and having discussions with MOU about what the terms of, discussions with DHCA about what the terms of an MOU would be. Just to sort of restate the background, in July, the county council approved an amendment to the county's capital improvement program, which created a new nonprofit preservation program. This came out of discussions that HOC had, that a number of other parties had, MHA members, other nonprofit affordable housing developers, as well as Councilmember Friedson in his capacity as chair of the PHP committee, led the effort to create this new fund. They identified $20 million for the fund, which was to come from repayments from a loan that the county had made for a large preservation acquisition, and they were expecting repayment on. In the meantime, that money has come back in, so it's now available for this fund. And as we talked about earlier tonight, the county executive has proposed in his capital budget adding an additional $15 million and has announced that he will propose adding another $15 million in March. And so if that he does, in fact, add that full $30 million and the council approves it, that would become available in the new fiscal year in July. And so there would be a total of $50 million in this fund. The fund was intended to try to be a preservation version of the HPF in a way. So a narrower scope and revolving fund with a clearer set of criteria than the Housing Trust Fund, which is sort of used to fund all kinds of different affordable housing needs. So the scope, the fund is intended to issue loans that would have 7 to 10 year terms, would provide a bridge between the acquisition of a property and then some kind of permanent stabilization, whether that be a low-income housing tax credit syndication or some kind of redevelopment plan. It is designated to serve properties that are at risk of losing affordability. So really targeting naturally occurring affordable housing that, whether by the zoning, redevelopment potential, or the rents in neighboring buildings, there's a sort of credible fear that if the property were to change hands, it could lose a significant amount of the affordability that it has. And this ties into the change in the right of first refusal law that we also discussed earlier this evening, because what that change would do is allow the county to no longer have to have this. They currently have a $70 million kind of cash fund that's just sitting there waiting to be able to execute ROFRs. By being able to assign the ROFR rather than having to execute it themselves and then transfer the property, even a few days later, they can allow a nonprofit or other entity that wants to be the ultimate owner of that property. They would be able to have their own financing and make the purchase directly. So that sort of frees up a lot of this funding to be able to serve this new purpose. HOC is allowed to access up to 25% of that funding for our own projects. And then we are also designated to serve as the sort of underwriter and provide administrative support for the remainder of the fund. And for that, we would receive a 1% origination fee on all of the loans that are issued, other than the ones that are issued to us. You can see in the packet a summary of the minimum affordability restrictions, same as the HPF, 20 at 50 and 10 at MPDU. And you have 3 years within that from the time of the acquisition to reach those affordability levels, so that you can do it without potential displacement in cases where the rents in some cases for these properties may already be higher than that. So I think Zach is going to describe the terms of the MOU itself and how that would play out.
Good evening for the record. Zachary Marks, Senior Vice President of Real Estate. To help assist DHCA with the rollout of this program, we patterned this engagement of HOC with the county after a fund that was created a few years ago for similar purposes, the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund. And in that case, DHCA actually put out an RFP and ultimately selected NHT. But that process, while NHT has done a great job, that process of procurement took a really, really long time. And so in order to get this fund rolled out faster and the government to government relationship between HOC and DHCA, HOC is effectively playing a very similar role to the role that NHT is playing in the AHOF. And so in this case, we're really kind of back of office administrative. So we have worked with DHCA to create all the form documents to their satisfaction with their endorsement. And really moving forward, all we're doing is really, again, that back of office administrative. So receiving applications, doing the confirmatory underwriting, preparing underwriting packages for DHCA because it's their loan committee that ultimately reviews and approves these. We are ranking, we do the preparatory ranking of these according to DHCA's priority list, which was affordability, proximity to transit, and the level of risk of losing that affordability at the property. And we simply provide them the evaluation, and then their loan committee ultimately makes the decision according to the package that we would provide to them. The other deal point that we negotiated with them is in order for us to confidently be staffed appropriately. As part of the first 20 million, HOC would actually be advanced the 1% origination fee on the non-HOC portion of that 20 million, such that we could confidently post a position and hire and know that the money was there and not have to wait for the origination fee to be paid initially by the eventual borrowers. So that was agreeable to DHCA. So the funding for us to make sure we have enough staff to process this is there from the beginning. And then ultimately what happens is for this first go round on the 20, as borrowers come in and ultimately take loans, they would pay the origination fee basically back to the fund. And so the fund doesn't actually, the 20 million there's not a net loss to the fund. It's just making sure HOC knows it's got the money to be able to go ensure proper staffing. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Yeah, I think in summation, we're asking for approval for HOC's president, executive director to finalize negotiations and execute an MOU with DHCA.
On the MOU, is there a time term for how long we would be playing this role in the administration of this fund?
The MOU goes through 2026, so 2-year initial term, and then it has options for extension that must be agreed to by both parties. So I think DHCA could evaluate whether during that time, as Mr. Marks mentioned, they could decide that they do want to go through the procurement process to seek a CDFI or some other entity to provide that service, or we could have a mutual agreement to extend beyond that.
Who would do the underwriting for our 25%?
We would do that as well. We wouldn't receive a fee for it.
Okay. It's still approval by their loan committee.
Commissioner Byrd, I have a couple of questions. I know you mentioned the nonprofits, but can you just explain who else could be users of this fund monies besides HOC?
It is limited to nonprofits. So the only other sort of category would be local government entities, for example, Rockville Housing Enterprises, which is Rockville City's PHA, Tacoma Park, Department of Housing and Community Development. Gaithersburg City has a city entity. So that would be the other category. Other than that, it would be 501c3s. And they do have to show there's some specific language about, showing that they're, have a history of affordable housing development in the region, and a good track record.
Okay, and then my last question is, does HOC has any legal risk or liability with the underwriting and admin of the fund? I mean, there's risk with everything. I know that DHCA will have the final approval of the loan, but just trying to understand if we have any type of liability for those loans, the processing, or what the tasks that we're going to perform with this MOU.
No, we have in the MOU that we don't make any guarantees about the financial stability of the borrowers.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Just a clarification. So it's not just that the rents would be required to be capped. There's actual income restrictions on the units.
Yeah. So affordability would be defined in the, I think, sort of standard way. So it's, 30%, that for somebody at 50% or below, it's affordable, 30% of their income, monthly income on rent. And it would follow, DHCA has a set.
So the current residents are earning more than the income restriction, then the building would, or the new owner would wait for them to turn over and before.
Exactly. And that's why that 3-year period is important to be able to do that, without displacing people, to have time to have natural turnover.
Okay. And then in terms of the new staff that you anticipate hiring, would that individual be dedicated just to this, or would they be available to work on other HOC projects?
Their primary responsibility, because they'll be funded through this grant, would be to focus on these projects.
I mean, the MOU doesn't specify, staffing or, I mean, it specifies performance metrics, so.
Okay. No other questions?
You want to make a motion?
I will make a motion to support resolution 2415.
Commissioner Byrd, I second.
It's been probably moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-15. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. So ordered. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to recess the meeting in order to convene the Development Corporation meetings?
I make the motion.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Byrd, I second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. We will now convene the Development Corporation meetings that are listed on the agenda. The Development Corporations are entities that are wholly controlled by HOC and own various properties. For each development corporation, the board of directors is comprised of the HOC commissioners, and the officers are the same as the officers of the commission. I now call the meeting of the RAD 6 Development Corporation to order. I return to the staff for the presentation.
Yes, and thank you. Commissioners, this matter did go before our Development Finance Committee, and it has to do with a cross easement and an opportunity to leverage a request that has been presented to us. It falls within RAD 6 Development Corp, and I will turn it over to Jay Shepherd to provide more information, our housing acquisition manager.
Thank you so much, President Andrews. This packet item starts on page 96. HOC, through its wholly owned development corporation, as mentioned, RAD 6 Development Corporation, owns Sandy Spring Meadow, which is a 55-unit, 30 townhomes, 25 single-family detached community in Sandy Spring. In January, we were approached by the new owner of the parcel that's immediately east of Sandy Spring Meadow and abuts Bentley Road. And that parcel consists of 3 lots that are currently undeveloped. That new owner wishes to construct new single-family detached homes on each of the individual lots. And they approached us seeking a more direct route for connecting their sanitary sewer access. For them, by accessing directly to the sanitary sewer connections on Sandy Spring Meadow, it lowers their connection cost for their development overall by shortening its path. They don't have to run down Bentley Road and turn up Route 108 to make that connection. HOC on our side, we have always looked at that parcel in terms of long-term planning. We were involved in the 2014 master planning or the sector plan for Sandy Spring Meadow. And in that planning process, we identified that there's a need for Sandy Spring Meadow to connect to Bentley Road for various uses. And one of those being pedestrian access. It allows pedestrians to more easily transverse over to Bentley Road and thus to 108, where the Sandy Spring Museum is, as well as Sherwood High School. And it also allows a secondary means, which is an ingress egress for emergency vehicles, if in the event that our one primary access point, which is Sky Meadow Way, is blocked. Turns out there's a third long-term plan for us that if there was ever a redevelopment potential of Sandy Spring Meadow, the county now requires 2 points of egress for all new developments. And so we would have to have that satisfied in order to make that future development viable. So to accomplish both parties' goals, we proposed a cross-access easement where we would allow the sanitary sewer access to them, and they would allow us pedestrian and the emergency vehicle access. The timing of this is important because to the extent that this easement is valuable to them, that allows us some leverage in order to obtain what we're looking for. And so from the outset, this is basically a plan to enact both of those parcels. So staff is recommending the commission authorize the RAD 6 Development Corporation, which is an HOC wholly owned entity, to execute a utility easement at Sandy Spring Meadow. That includes the modification of any existing WSSC easements that we have related to to that easement, and receive in exchange an emergency egress and pedestrian easement to Bentley Road. Thank you. And I'll happy to answer any questions.
Is there a cost to HOC for this at all? I don't think I saw anything in the packet.
Yeah, this is just the approval to get the easement in place.
Okay.
It does not obligate HOC to make these improvements. They would actually bear the burden to make the improvements for the sanitary sewer connection.
Okay, thank you.
So move.
Aye.
Yeah, it was Pam. No, it was him.
No further business to come before the corporation. I now call the meeting of the Scatter Site One Development Corporation to order. Thank you, staff, for the presentation.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. This is a recommendation to move forward with the construction at those 10 scattered sites that we've identified. They happen to fall within various DevCorp structures. And I will turn it over to Kimberly King, who will give an abbreviated version of this request.
Good evening again, commissioners. So I'm here today to ask for the approval to select and execute a contract with Innovative Design and Technology and Construction as the general contractor in pursuance to IFB 2435. The Housing Opportunity Commission has begun their renovation programs of the scattered sites. In order to meet the comprehensive unit renovation needs, we need to renovate the units that haven't undergone any renovations. Out of the 10 units, there are 2 TPM Development Corporation units that we are requesting approval for. The units are currently vacant and will be vacant during the renovation period. The Development and Finance Committee considered these items during a meeting that took place on January 26, 2024, and they supported the staff recommendation that the commission approved and select Innovative Technology Design and Construction as the general contractor. Of the 9 firms, as you guys heard before, we found 6 responsive. We went with the lowest, most qualified bidder, who will take over the lump sum 10-unit project. And as the 2, we are requesting that the Board of Directors of the TPM Development Corporation accept our recommendation for Innovative Technology, Design and Construction to complete the 2 units and this DevCorp package in the amount of, for the total amount of $1,238,535.64 for all 10 units, and they will be funded by the CIP program.
To make a quick point of clarification, she was referencing TPM. That's the next DevCorp presentation. This one is Scattered Sites 1. So it's the 8 units that fall under this same facts, same request. Scattered Site 1, 2 units. Thank you. Let the record reflect 2 units. Scattered Site 1. That's our request at this time.
Thank you, President Andrews.
Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-0301 SSI?
Commissioner Byrd, I move that we approve resolution number 24001 SS1.
Is there a second?
I second.
All properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay, so ordered. With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. I will now call the meeting of the TPM Development Corporation to order. Turn to the staff for a presentation. And we just heard the presentation already for this matter.
We We just need the record to
So-
reflect that there's a request before this board to move forward with selecting this contractor IFB to oh, not the IFB. No, we issued a IFB. We're asking to select innovative technology, design and construction to perform scattered sites improvements.
Just so it's not confusing to anybody who's listening. The commission previously approved resolution 24-14 for this action. And all we're doing, because it relates to the development corporation, we have to formally adopt it as the development corporation. That's what we're doing.
Right.
So just, it's like, it sounds a little redundant, you know, what it is. So is there a motion to approve resolution 24-001 TPM?
Commissioner Byrd, I move approval of resolution number 24-001 TPM.
Is there a second? Been properly moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-001 TPM. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So ordered. With no further business to come before the corporation, this meeting is adjourned. This concludes the Development Corporation meetings. We will now reconvene HOC's regular monthly meeting. As you know, that we usually have 10 of these Development Corporation things to do, so I'm glad we only have 3 today. So we are now reconvened back to our monthly meeting. Now we are into item 4 of our agenda, items requiring deliberation and on actions continue. Is the election of officers for HOC.
You, commissioners, as the secretary of the commission, I will move us through this process. This evening, we will hold the election for the 2024 officers of HOC. At this time, I would like to open the floor for nominations for the office of chair, vice chair, and chair pro tem. Okay. Starting with nominations for chair.
Commissioner Byrd, I nominate Commissioner Roy Priest as chair.
Thank you. Any others? I open the floor for nominees for vice chair.
Vice Chair, I nominate the name of Commissioner Jeffrey Merkowitz.
Thank you. Any others? I open the floor for nominees for chair pro tem.
I nominate for Chair Pro Tem Commissioner Robin Solomon.
Thank you. Any others? All right. Hearing no other nominations, nominations are now closed. I now call for a vote for the slate, or I'll go position by position. For the nominees, the nominee for chair, Roy Priest, I'd like to request a response and a vote. Chair Priest, I'm certain your vote is yes. Commissioner Kelleher,
I abstain.
Commissioner Solomon,
Aye.
Croom,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Merkowitz.
Yes.
Thank you. For the vote as it pertains to vice chair, I will do a roll call vote. Commissioner, and the nominee is Jeff Merkowitz. Commissioner Priest,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelleher,
I abstain.
Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
Croom,
Yes.
Byrd,
Aye.
and Merkowitz.
Yes.
Thank you. And for Chair Pro Tem, the nominee is Robin Solomon. Again, Chair Priest,
Yes.
Kelleher,
Yes.
Solomon,
I abstain.
Croom,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Merkowitz.
Yes.
Thank you. We now have our nominees all approved for our 2024, 2025 year. Our chair, Roy Priest, our recurring chair, as well as our vice chair, Vice Chair Merkowitz, and Chair Pro Tem Robin Solomon. Thank you all very much.
Before we adjourn the meeting, I'd like to take the liberty to, in fact, thank Commissioner Frank Kelleher I'd like to thank Van Kelleher for serving as the vice chair of the commission for the last 3 years and acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank
The
you
meeting is
all.
now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.